Alexander the Great has been credited with setting the stage for the spread of Christianity. Fascinating. He not only desired to defeat the Persians, but his goal was to make the world Greek. To make the world Greek language, Greek culture, Greek laws, Greek religion. So as they went on this miraculous, I hope your guide explained to you how in 13 years, he basically not only conquered the Persians, but spread this amazing empire. So as he would go and conquer, he'd leave a general with a group of soldiers. They'd do a city from the tribes, and they would speak Greek. And they would have Greek gods, Greek laws, Greek culture. Until the end of it all, the whole empire was Greek. He won the day. Well, interestingly enough, after he finally died, his empire split into tiny little groups where generals took different parts of it. And so they weren't strong. They had small armies, which opened the door for the Roman Empire to come and totally defeat that whole area. So now that became the Roman Empire. And then the Roman Empire went all the way west to the UK. So think of the Roman Empire being like huge. And it's not only huge, it is also, everybody say Greek. It was also Greek. Kind of slow this morning, but it's all right. But it was also Greek. It was an empire that had just one language. It had no national barriers. It had, Alexander the Great structured the coinage, a system of economy. It had all one economy. It was totally unified. And interesting, when the Romans took over it, they built roads. Listen to this, 50,000 miles of roads, and had sophisticated sea lanes. Say, well, what does this have to do with the spread of the gospel? All right, think about this. Paul's going to be the apostle to the known world, right? The whole empire. Does he have to go to language school? That's interesting, because everybody speaks Greek. One monetary system. Does he have to worry about the exchange rates when he goes? Does he need a passport? Does he need a visa? Are there roads which he can go on? Are there seafaring lanes to get him where he wants to go? And that all started with Alexander to accelerate the amazing speed of the gospel. And what's interesting is that Paul went to Spain and probably to the UK. Thomas went all the way down to India. Matthew probably went to Ethiopia. John went to Ephesus. Philip went to Asia Minor, and the gospel spread with rapidity. So here's what I think. What a coincidence that Jesus was born at a time like this. Wasn't God lucky? Well, let me help you theologically a little bit. Galatians 4:4. This is what Paul writes, that in the fullness of time, what's the rest? God sent forth his Son. That God had been managing the history for this moment. That Alexander the Great was a piece of the management of the history to prepare for the gospel. That the Roman Empire, with all of its strengths that accelerated the gospel, was a piece of God managing the history to bring about the great event. Is anybody here really thankful that God manages history to accomplish his plan? There should be more of us for that. We're really thankful that God manages history to accomplish his plans. So now God's done. He managed history. The fullness of time came. He sent forth his Son. The gospel with speed spread through the new world. Now he's done. So he rests, like Sabbath rest. Or is there another great event yet to come? Is there another great event to come? What? That God would send forth his Son again. This, as Mark talked about, the second coming. So I think it's right to assume that God still manages the events of history to accomplish his plan. So that every time you read a global headline about something that's happening, you just need to know that may be God's hand managing toward the time of Christ's return. I can't imagine him saying, Putin invaded the Ukraine? Oh, what are we going to do now? Like, back to the strategy room, like we got to redo the plan all over again. That he manages that, which should give you a confidence that God will bring the right time, manage all of history, never be intimidated, and bring Jesus at just the right time. So what difference does that make to you? That takes me to 1 John chapter 3, verse 2. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who has this hope purifies himself. It's kind of like Mark was talking this morning, getting ready for Jesus. I want to be as pure as I can be when he arrives. Everyone who has this hope purifies himself. Every day, we ought to be looking for him to return. I have a friend who founded a home for mentally challenged children. And a lot of them are Down syndrome children who have some marginal understanding of life, and some of them accept the Lord. And he said to me one time, Joe, do you know what our major maintenance problem is here? Well, I have no clue. He said, dirty windows. Dirty windows? He said, yeah, because these little children who accept Christ always go to the window, press their hands in their faces, looking to see if this could be the day that Jesus returns. Have any dirty windows in your heart? Anybody really excited for him to come? Anybody motivated to live purely, to be ready for him to come? Lord, haste the day, right? When we all get to heaven. When my dad was passing away, we was around his bed. He wanted to sing all of his favorite hymns. And his most favorite hymn was, when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing. Sing the wondrous song of Jesus. And I thought, wouldn't it be fab for us to sing that song together right here? Yeah, of course. Why don't you stand up? Ready? Sing the wondrous love of Jesus. Sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Amen. You may be seated. Good work. Does that kind of thrill your soul to sing those words? It does mine. So that in this very day, in every headline you read, it's the hand of God managing our history to bring about that fullness of time when he comes. It's not only a global thing, it's a personal thing. How many of you know that God in this moment is managing the history of your life? I was speaking at a conference in North Carolina, and a couple came to me after one of the sessions and said to me, "Could we talk to you?" I said, "Sure." And they told me the story about their son, who was the leader of the youth group at church and a really good kid, who had ended up in a head-on crash with a drunk driver and instantly died. And he said, they said, we went to our pastor, and he said to us, "Well, God didn't know about that." First of all, that's terrible therapy, and it's even worse theology, because God does manage the affairs. I find it interesting that in Job, Satan had to get permission from God to bother Job. And God said, you can do this, and you can't do that, you can do this, managing the history of his life. And so, I wonder if you're willing to believe Romans 8:28, that God, the manager of the history of your life, like he was the manager of the history of Christ's coming, managing the second coming, managing the history of your life, that he can and will, what? Work. Hey, is that a big phrase? All things together for good to them who love God and are called according to his purpose. So he manages to good outcomes. He manages to what is good for you and manages to what is glorious for him. And you can count on that. There's a time that Marty and I were into jigsaw puzzles. The only thing that bothered me about that is the only recollection I had of jigsaw puzzles were in nursing homes. But it wasn't the jigsaw puzzle, it was the box top in a gift shop that got us. One of the box tops was a pile of Oreo cookies with a glass of sweating milk dropped into the mountain of Oreo cookies. We have to buy that, right? The other one was a triple-decker hamburger, just juice and everything. Like, we have to buy that. And I remember coming home and ripping the cellophane off the box and opening up the box and throwing the 1,000 pieces on the table. Despair. Like, what happened? Has your life ever felt like scattered pieces on a table that make no sense? The only thing that rescued me was the box top. Oh, that's it right there. Oh, that's how it will end up. So I came all the way from Grand Rapids, Michigan to tell you today that God has all the box tops for your life. And he's busy managing the history of your life for your good and his glory. Amen? Amen. So we have to thank Alexander for setting the stage, right? I'll make the world Greek. Well, thank you. We'll make the world gospel.